I'm Peter Bushell. I'm an associate professor at Illinois State University. I've been teaching there for almost 28 years, teaching graphic design. And within the last 11 years, I've shifted my research to artist books and letterpress prints. Well, the new studio, it's totally exciting. I learned letterpress printing as an undergrad and continued doing some work through graduate school. And then as I came here on staff and started teaching and stuff, I was doing other stuff. And so letterpress printing was just totally dormant for umpteen years. In about 2013, I was lucky enough to take a class at a residency, and that sparked it again. And that was in the context of having done artist books for X amount of years. So I was sort of into the culture, and now I can see that letterpress printing is a huge part of my practice. And so the studio is fresh. It's in my garage, and I have 3 presses set up, and I've been productive so far. It's awesome. It's interesting. Of course, the work happens first. I have a sense of it going into the space, and but then trying to figure out the name for the show or the name for the pieces, of course, happens after more of the work is done. And I came up with Deconstruct, a chord, totally related to the 2 pieces, to the 2 bodies of work that are in the show. Deconstruct is a larger wall piece of 32 prints, and it references book and book structure a little bit, but also the components that are there. And so type, typography, layout, text overall, and other book components, for example, a title page. The other series on the other wall in space is a series of 5 prints, and they are a chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they are about harmony. They're about composition. They're about, well, of course, they're abstraction. In terms of letterpress, they're about finding details in letter forms, but finding them through cropping. And so, for sure, the intention was color and sort of brilliance and a good dynamic through that. But it's abstraction and letter forms all wrapped up in one. So all of it together, every time there's a relationship between things, of course I'm looking for greatness or harmony or a good relationship overall. The text blocks are, of course, one element in a normal or conventional book structure. And part of my work in these 2 bodies of work, part of my effort is abstraction and challenging the norms. So I wanted to make sure that that I'm working off of those original or sort of familiar forms, but then giving them new life. So, for example, the quote text that's in this work isn't. There's no single word that's readable or real, except, well, you'll find out. So the intention is to pull off of that original life of what text is, and of course my background as a graphic designer working with text and headers and image text relationships and stuff in books or publications is all where that comes from. And so I wanted to work with those familiar things but give them to the viewer in a totally unconventional way. I worked to make it feel as texty as possible, finding ascenders and descenders and finding sort of length of words and fairly normal word spaces and stuff like that. And then, of course, just positioning it on the page becomes another compositional moment like the other elements on the page. The connective detail is letterpress prints. And so I've done other series like the Accord series and played with abstraction, played with conventional letter forms, but giving them to the viewer in a different way and finding harmony and so forth. And so the Deconstruct piece that has more of a book reference, the intention was to initially start off with a larger piece overall. In terms of being a printmaker and oftentimes working within the limits of the press and thinking small prints, I wanted to see how a larger piece could be built. And a structure that I thought of almost immediately was pairings or diptychs. Of course, in graphic design, we say the spread in a book, 2 pages next to each other. And of course, then once I had that reference to book and thinking spreads, then it really became a more clear structure like that, where, for example, in a diagram of pagination of a book, you'd have a single first page, and then you'd start with the spreads and see pairings until they run out, and then the last page is a single page as well, and that becomes the structure on the wall. I think if we try to connect it to graphic design and maybe add the word commercial to that, sure. There is that growth in sort of welcoming again of letterpress, but it's much more of an artistic view. I mean, gig posters and greeting cards and wedding invitations, those kinds of things, those are all commercial endeavors for sure. And there are plenty of artists that are out there that are using letterpress as that medium to produce it. But I think also just on the art end, it's prevalent in terms of a medium as printmaking. So it's sort of lost its commercial connection way more over the years and has sort of just become more of an art practice. And I think there's only a little bit of a connection back into graphic design. I think with everyone being fairly savvy, I might say desktop publishing, we know that the computer allows almost everyone to be able to handle type on a daily basis. A lot of times we get font and type mixed up, or we sort of use it in an odd way. I think almost everyone who hears anyone using it still gets it and understands it. But the more formal term for font really does have a reference to letterpress, to metal type from umpteen years ago. If someone was going to order a font, they would be ordering a single point size of a typeface. So if I wanted Garamond 14 points, I would make my order and I would get my type all ready to be used on my press and in production. And a font would come with A through Z capital letters, A through Z lowercase letters, a whole set of punctuation and numbers and so forth, times however many numbers you need, for it to be defined as a font, so that it's functional in a print shop and for job work like business cards and whatever else. So, but a typeface is essentially the visual, So if I say Garamond 14 is irrelevant when we talk about the typeface. So it's the look of the typeface. And so Garamond is one of our traditional serif faces. Helvetica is our classic sans serif face. And so the look of that is what we're used to. And oftentimes people will say, use Helvetica font, but the better term would be the typeface, Helvetica. It's awesome to work with you and Doug and other staff that are here. It's a great space to be able to show in. If you think sort of formally, being able to put work in a gallery space and the opportunity for the public to come in and so forth, that's great. But I think also to broaden that out and just to think of the exposure overall. It feels awesome to think that as a region, in terms of Central Illinois, being able to come in and see more work, it feels nice to think that others are getting a feel of what I can do in the studio.